Why did Jesus go to hell before rising? The question that nobody wants to answer. Let me ask you something that most people are too afraid to touch. Why would the Son of God, pure, sinless, and divine, go to the one place everyone's trying to avoid? Hell? Seriously, just pause for a second. You're Jesus. You've been obedient to God your whole life. You lived sinlessly. You healed the sick, raised the dead, cast out demons, forgave sins, preached love. You conquered death on the cross, and yet your spirit descends into the pit of darkness? Why? Now I know, right out the gate, this sounds controversial, uncomfortable even. Some people have heard whispers of it, but never dared ask the question out loud. Others didn't even know this was a part of the gospel story. And maybe you've never heard a sermon on it either, because churches don't like talking about what happened between the cross and the resurrection. But that space, that gap in time, is where one of the most powerful mysteries of Christianity lives. And let me be clear, Jesus didn't accidentally stumble into hell. He went there on purpose. But what was he doing there? Was he suffering? Was he preaching? Was he fighting? Was he rescuing someone? And most importantly, what does it mean for you? Because trust me, what he did in those hidden hours between death and resurrection might just change the way you see your entire walk with God. This story isn't just about Jesus, it's about you. It's about your soul. It's about what happens when you die. So before you skip to the part where the tomb is empty, let's go back and explore the part of the story the world ignores. The part where Jesus descended into hell and flipped the spirit realm upside down. What is hell, and why would Jesus go there? Now, before we even begin to talk about Jesus going to hell, we have to stop and ask something that most people never question. What is hell really? You see, when we hear hell, our minds instantly flash to fiery torment, demons with pitchforks and eternal screams echoing through darkness. But the word hell in the Bible isn't as straightforward as pop culture makes it seem. There are actually 3 different words in the Bible translated as hell: Sheol, Hebrew; Hades, Greek; Gehenna, Greek, symbolic of eternal judgment. The word used for where Jesus went, it wasn't Gehenna, the lake of fire. It was Hades, the place of the dead. In Jewish understanding, Sheol or Hades was the shadowy realm where all souls went after death, both the righteous and the wicked. It wasn't hellfire as we imagine it today. It was a waiting place, a realm of the dead divided into 2 sides, a place of torment for the wicked, a place of comfort for the righteous, called Abraham's bosom. Now here's the crazy part. When Jesus told the story of the rich man and Lazarus in Luke 16, he described this exact scene. The rich man dies and ends up in torment. Lazarus dies and is carried to Abraham's side, comforted in paradise. And between them, a great chasm that no one could cross. So when Jesus died, he went into that place. He crossed into the realm of the dead, not to suffer for sin that was finished on the cross, but to do something far more powerful. He entered Hades to finish what he started. Now take a second, let that sink in. Why would he go into the place of the dead unless there was unfinished business? What was waiting for him there? What forces were watching and trembling the moment he entered? Now imagine this. The moment Jesus breathed his last breath on the cross, the veil in the temple was torn. The earth shook, rocks split, graves burst open, darkness fell. It wasn't just a symbolic moment, it was cosmic. But while his body was being laid in a tomb, his spirit was moving, and not upward, but downward. Jesus descended into the place of the dead, not defeated, not broken, not as a victim. He went as a warrior. This was not a second punishment. He wasn't going to suffer. That was already finished on the cross. He said it himself. It is finished. But what was finished? The penalty of sin. The debt had been paid. But now, he had one more thing to do. You see, before Jesus came, no one could enter heaven, not even the righteous. The blood of bulls and goats couldn't fully cleanse sin. So even the faithful, Abraham, Moses, Elijah, David, they didn't go straight to the throne of God. They waited in Abraham's bosom, a paradise-like compartment of Hades. So picture it, generations of the faithful waiting, watching, hoping, and then suddenly light breaks through the darkness. The gates of the underworld tremble, and he walks in, the King, the Messiah, the Son of God. Can you imagine the moment? The murmurs, the sudden stillness, the demons in the shadows whispering in fear. He's here. The serpent's greatest weapon, death, was being dismantled from the inside out. Jesus had come to set the captives free. He came to fulfill Psalm 68:18. When you ascended on high, you took many captives. He came to fulfill Ephesians 4:9-10. He also descended to the lower parts of the earth in order to fill all things. He wasn't just paying a visit. He was leading a rescue mission. He preached to the spirits in prison, 1 Peter 3:19. Not to offer them salvation, they had made their choices, but to declare victory, to announce judgment, to reclaim what hell tried to keep. He came to empty paradise, to unlock the doors that had kept the righteous in waiting. And then, he led them out. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your life has been in a spiritual prison? Like you're walking in circles, stuck in a place where your calling feels forgotten? Jesus knows that feeling, because he went to the deepest prison to break the chains of others so he could break yours. Now let's talk about what really shook hell to its core. When Jesus descended, he didn't go empty-handed. But even more terrifying to the kingdom of darkness, he didn't leave empty-handed either. Revelation 1:18. I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. And I have the keys of death and Hades. The keys, the ultimate symbol of authority. Jesus didn't just unlock the doors, he took the keys. He took back authority from the one who stole it in Eden. He crushed the serpent's head with his pierced heel. Death no longer had dominion. Hell no longer held fear. And Satan no longer had the last word. Let that hit you. Hell doesn't own the keys to hell. Death doesn't control death. Jesus does. And here's the question you have to wrestle with. If Jesus has the keys, why are so many Christians still living like they're locked in a prison? Why do we walk in fear, shame, and guilt like the door hasn't already been opened? Because hell doesn't need to keep you bound, if it can convince you to stay in the cell with the door wide open. While Jesus was descending into the realm of the dead, the earth above was in a strange kind of silence, a Sabbath. But not just any Sabbath. This one was drenched in confusion, grief, and fear. Can you imagine what it felt like to be a disciple in those hours? One moment, you're watching the sky go dark in the middle of the day. You're hearing the ground crack open. You're seeing your Messiah cry out in agony. In the next moment, nothing. No voice, no thunder, no Jesus. The streets were quieter than usual. The temple stood cold and empty, its veil now ripped from top to bottom, God's presence exposed. And in a borrowed tomb outside the city walls, the body of the Son of God lay still. It was the quietest war in history. But don't mistake silence for inactivity, because while the disciples wept, Jesus warred. While the world mourned, Jesus conquered. The enemy probably thought it had won. The Pharisees probably slept well that night. The Roman guards probably mocked the followers of Jesus, saying, well, I guess your king wasn't so powerful after all. But in the spirit realm, chains were snapping, doors were slamming open. The underworld was in chaos. And here's what might blow your mind. Graves were already opening. Matthew 27:52-53 tells us that after Jesus died, many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And after his resurrection, they came out of their graves and entered Jerusalem. Can you imagine walking down the street and seeing someone who died years ago standing right in front of you? What was happening? The spiritual realm and the physical world were colliding. The ground couldn't contain what God was doing underground. Heaven was preparing to erupt. Hell was collapsing under its own fear. And earth was holding its breath. Let me ask you a question right now. Have you ever been in a season of silence? A time when it felt like God was gone? When you didn't see movement, didn't hear answers, didn't feel his presence? Could it be that in those very moments, God was doing his deepest work underground? Because sometimes resurrections don't begin with noise. They begin in silence, in stillness, in tombs. It happened just before sunrise. A stillness covered the land, thick like fog. The guards stood by the tomb, half asleep, barely alert, swords at their sides, guarding a stone that sealed what they believed was over. But then, boom, the ground began to shake, not like a normal earthquake. This was the tremor of divine power re-entering flesh. This was heaven itself pressing into the physical world. Matthew 28:2 says, "And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it." The angel didn't fight the guards. He didn't shout. He just rolled away the stone. Not so Jesus could come out, but so we could see in. And while that was happening on earth, hell was going quiet, because Jesus, the risen King, was no longer in their domain. The keys he took, they were no longer hanging on the gates of death. They were in his hand. Imagine it from the underworld's perspective. A door that had never opened before suddenly shatters. The sound of light, yes, the sound, crashes through every dark hallway. Demons scream and scatter. The serpent's head, once lifted in triumph, now lays crushed, and Jesus walks out, alive. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but resurrected in glory. And with him, the captives of the grave. Spiritual chains lay abandoned. The once impossible barrier between man and God was now permanently broken. Let me pause here and ask you, have you ever thought God left you in a grave? That your dreams, your purpose, your calling, it all died and got sealed behind a stone? What if I told you that your silence is just the prelude to your earthquake? That the shaking you feel is not your destruction, it's the sound of resurrection? You don't serve a Savior who avoids graves. You serve one who enters them and walks back out. So, why does all of this matter? Why does it matter that Jesus went to hell before rising? Because it tells you something about who he really is and who you really are. This wasn't just a spiritual flex. This wasn't a plot twist in a cool divine story. This was a declaration of war against everything that has ever tried to keep you in bondage. Let's go deep for a second. Every religion offers you advice. Every philosophy offers you wisdom. But only Jesus steps into the worst of your pain and says, "I've been there too, and I brought the keys." He didn't just die for you, he descended for you. He didn't just pay the price. He went into the darkest place to break the receipt over the devil's head and say, "Paid in full. He's mine now, she's mine now." That means there's no place too dark that his light can't reach. No trauma so deep, no addiction so powerful, no past so stained, no shame so heavy that Jesus hasn't already walked through it and crushed it underfoot. Have you ever felt like you're living in spiritual chains? Like you pray but nothing breaks? Like you're standing behind an invisible wall screaming for freedom, but the chains still rattle? Listen, if Jesus descended into hell, grabbed the keys, rose up in power, and handed you the authority, why are you still waiting for permission to walk out of your grave? The prison door is open. The stone has been rolled away. The sentence has been canceled. So why are we still living like we're condemned? Maybe the devil can't stop you, so instead he tries to convince you that you're still stuck, still guilty, still bound, still disqualified. But hear me loud and clear. If Jesus went to hell to set captives free, why would you choose to stay there? Let's bring this in personally. Some of you watching this right now have been living like your spirit is still trapped in a tomb. You've buried your calling, you've buried your joy, you've buried your faith. But Jesus didn't rise alone. He brings people with him. And the real question is, will you rise too? Not just metaphorically. I mean, really rise. In your mind, in your habits, in your identity, in your faith. Because he didn't fight through hell just for a religious holiday. He did it so you could live resurrected. We've traveled deep into the mystery, from the cross to the grave to the depths of hell and back into resurrection glory. But here's where everything ties together. The story of Jesus going to hell and rising again isn't just about the past. It's a blueprint for your future. Let that sink in. When Jesus walked into death, hell, and the grave, and came out holding the keys, He didn't just defeat your sin, he dismantled the very structure of death itself. See, before Jesus, death was a wall. You hit it, and that was it. Whether you were righteous or wicked, it was a one-way street. But after Jesus, death became a door that opens into eternity for those who are found in him. Not because you earned it, not because you're perfect, but because he walked through that door first and left it open behind him. Revelation 1:18 wasn't just poetic, it's a declaration of eternal ownership. I hold the keys of death and Hades. That means the devil doesn't decide where your soul goes. That means shame doesn't get the final word. That means sickness, depression, anxiety, even death itself are defeated enemies. And here's something powerful. Jesus didn't take the keys just to hold them. He gave them to you. Matthew 16:19. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. You've been given authority, not borrowed, not temporary, real eternal authority. So why do we live like victims? Why do we act like hell still holds the power? It doesn't. Let me ask you one last question. If you truly believe that Jesus conquered hell for you, if you really understood that he descended into darkness and came out with you on his mind, how would you live differently? Would you pray with more boldness? Would you worship with more fire? Would you walk into your calling with more confidence? Would you finally let go of what's been holding you down? Because hear me, you don't belong in the grave. You don't belong in fear. You don't belong in chains. You belong resurrected. Jesus didn't just rise from the dead, he rose so you could rise too. This isn't just a story about what happened, it's a prophecy about what's coming. Because one day that same Jesus who walked into hell and crushed it underfoot will return. And on that day, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, every force of darkness will remember the moment he descended and rose again. And all creation will echo his final victory cry. Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your sting? O grave, where is your victory? Now I want to ask you, what does Jesus' descent into hell mean to you personally? Do you see it as a moment of cosmic justice, a rescue mission, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. If you made it this far, it means something inside you is hungry for truth. Hungry for more than religion, more than tradition. You want to know the real Jesus, so don't stop here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. We go deep every time. We must rise.